亚历克斯卡普刚刚做了一个极为深度的演讲涉及到人工智能、文化，还有它的产品、社会制度，还有整个社会的一个价值分配，多个层面的问题。我看完之后，整个人都感觉是一种感觉是血脉喷张。我认为你看懂了他的这个演讲呢，你能够更深的去理解整个硅谷它现在的一个方向，还有 Palantir 的底层价值，这两方面都会有很大的帮助。
One of the things people forget about philosophy is the core concepts are actually downstream from things that were built in the world. Modern architecture led to modern philosophy. Postmodern architecture led to postmodern philosophy. And there's a weird way in which I think a lot of the trends that look inscrutable to us are actually downstream of tech and culture, and are particularly pronounced in this culture, which is the only culture that really, really matters in AI. It's from chips and what we call ontology to large language models, to the talent, to the venture backing, to the understanding of how to organize the talent. They're in one country, and our country. And this does not make sense because it could have made sense in other trends, but actually the mathematical basis of large language models started in Germany. It was Leibniz's idea of how to do probability, and then moved through France. And the best mathematicians in the world are mostly in France and in Russia. And so what was it and what is it about what's happening that is affecting things that look very odd? Why do Ivy League trained humanities, highly privileged people vote against their interest, seemingly, to elect political figures with no experience and who clearly, why are they misaligned with their own interests? Would be a question. And then why is it in America? And I want to just start with the most obvious point that is so obvious we forget, that the rights we have in this country are inalienable and they are given to us by God. As if you compare this to, say, the German Constitution, which I wrote down, the same, it's where we talk about endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. The German version, which is translate roughly as a conscience of his responsibility before God, so not from God, and mankind, inspired by the will of an equal member, to be part of, this is rough translation, united Europe and to contribute to world peace. Okay, so we have these rights that are incorporated in our First and Second and in our Fourth Amendment that aren't given to us by humans, they're given to us by a higher power. That's very, very important in understanding. When you look at businesses as an example, some businesses that are 5 years appeal to be 20 years old. Some businesses, we have Rupert Murdoch here who seems to be getting younger every year. Every year. I've known you for a long time. Why is that? The principle, and then you have this revolution. It's happening in a country which, at least constitutionally, obviously not historically, is much, much older than Europe. United Europe is it's under 30 years old, and it's still not clear what it is really. You have a country which should not have been the leader of what matters in the world, but is the leader in the world. And then we have a very big moral problem. And the basis of most human rights, historically, philosophically, legally, except for in America, have been based on our basically superior cognitive capacities. And, as Huntington once famously said, we believe in the West that our values are superior. The non-West understands it's our ability to organize violence, which is an intellectual and technological endeavor. And that's the thing that has made us, at the end of the day, be able to be superior over non-human life forms. With large language models and AI, you actually have the first time where how do we justify our obvious superiority, not just as a culture, but as a species, vis-a-vis something that may be able to do cognitive things that we can't do. And we are the lone country that has the basis for this. Our rights are not given to us by our intellectual superiority. They're not given to us by a consensus built in Germany or in the United Kingdom. They're not built to dedicate to world peace, although that would be nice. They're given to us by our right that we were born here as Americans, and those rights are indelible. And this is a very big distinction, and it's one that we neglect and do not talk about, and for lots of reasons, many in the Valley may not be interested in talking about. And then why are these so important? First of all, so obviously we have our rights vis-a-vis the machine. And then you also have, what does it mean to be in a world where you have very high-end labor being exceedingly valuable, formerly high-end labor, meaning you studied humanities and you would be working in a 501c3 dedicated to the United Nations, not being objectively valuable. I don't mean morally. Most of us here would look askance at that as being misaligned with what they're saying. But even if you don't view it that way, the reality is a large language model can do all of that work. And if it's an ontology, we can do it much, much better. So it's objectively not valuable. What is valuable is working class, vocationally trained people with specific knowledge. And here I see a tethering between the specificity of America, that we have a constitution given to us by God, that we believe in higher principles, that we defend them if we need to with our own guns, with our own free speech, and with our own rights of privacy, and the specific things that create value in the world now, meaning specific knowledge of how to build something, how to target something, how to protect data, how to be a nurse or a doctor. These skills can be very levered and excruciatingly important. So you have a constitutional and moral tethering of exactly what you would need in one specific culture, and that's this culture. But you're going to have a lot of turbulence because we're now moving from people who believe they deserved empathy, and this is when I think the biggest tensions, one of the very radical things about Palantir that our enemies do not believe. We at Palantir have maximal empathy for Americans, for the right of Americans to be free, and for men and women that actually do work. And our society, if you look at any professions, what you'll see, we read the law, so somehow the law will not allow us to protect Americans who are being murdered by fentanyl. But more Americans have died of fentanyl than have died in any war since World War II. If those were Stanford grads or Cornell grads, you can bet your last dollar the erudite jurisdictions would read the law so that you could stop that. But they're not. They're working class, they're mostly male, they're mostly white, and mostly people don't care. And we have to change that. When things go wrong because those people know that no one cares about them, that's also our fault. Like, not anyone in this room, but like, we don't show empathy. If you look at, for example, the way analysts more neutrally do models, they love the people they like. It shows up downstream in the model. That's why Palantir was undervalued. We were undervalued and misunderstood because we were doing radical, crazy stuff they didn't like. If you look all across the world, and what you're seeing go on in America now is an enormous shift towards we have to actually look at where the value is created and have empathy with people who really deserve it. And those people have not got enough empathy, and technology is about to change that. And it's going to change everything politically because it is actually real. The worker, the person on the front, the people that write the scripts that protect us, all those projects you saw are being done by people with vocational training in the military. They're creating enormous value, and they deserve the respect that they're going to ask for and they're going to get. And Palantir, and all of us are Palantir, are behind that. And then conversely, how do you get a situation in this city where you just vote for someone who has no experience in doing what they're going to do? None. Even like I view myself as classically progressive. I care. You know what classically progressive is? The government has to work. You know what that means? You need the very best people. Who are the people? They have experience running complicated organizations. They have ideas on how to run software. They understand the complexity of the law. They enforce it. If you're really serious about making the things work for the worker, those are the people you vote for. Those are the people that need to be in charge. And that's why a lot of these crazy things are actually very much explicable based on what is going on in AI and who's creating the value and how they create it. Then last, maybe not least, on the AI front, one of the reasons we are in a kind of a doomer AI circle is because you can only explain the promise of AI if you understand and embrace the superiority of America and its culture. Because there are dangers in AI, but the reality is there's only two cultures that are going to win in the next year. It's going to be us or China. Europe, I spent half my life in Europe. At this point, when we talk about Europe, we do exactly the same thing as when we hear about educational programs led by mayors or safety programs in the inner city. We just say that I really hope it works out. Please, and I want Europe to win, but we're on our own. Of course there are dangers in AI, and AI is also and will never be anything other than a dual-use technology. But we must embrace our ability to build it, our ability to own the chips, to own the software, build the large language models, and run very, very quickly. Because, again, to quote Huntington again, if we are not the ones controlling the violence, we will not be dictating the rule of law. The things we hold precious in this culture, I would say embodied by our Constitution and especially in our first 4 amendments, those things will not be the same if we are not the dominant technological culture in the world. And while we may have tons of disagreements on these things, we must, those are really the alternatives. And most of what we can do, in my view, to counter our adversaries is also to build the technology. And then one of the lessons of Palantir is no one's coming to defend you. You have to defend yourself. And we used to live in a world where you could rely on experts to articulate our vision. But who showed up to articulate our vision in this last election in my hometown, formerly hometown? If we're waiting for people to articulate and fight for us, we are cooked. And the people who disagree with us are often better organized and and more motivated. And that's a huge problem we have to solve. Palantirians, half of the reason we succeeded is we were just motivated and very organized and very meritocratic. Meritocracy is the most underestimated, powerful, revolutionary tool that exists in any enterprise ever. And that means, Sham is a great example. Sham was not everyone's cup of tea. He advanced for really 2 reasons. He advanced because I thought he was going to be an incredible human being. And second, and I'll leave you with this, because I saw him interacting with his brother, and I was like, if he could love Palantir half as much as he loves his brother, we are going to have the most important enterprise in the world. And the capacity to identify and advance people on a meritocratic base that have capacity to care is the single most revolutionary tool. And my kind of thinker has been infected, meaning the Progressive Party and the Democrats, by people who do not believe in this. And by the way, to my Democratic friends here and whoever sees this, that we must stand up. One of the most important lessons in the West is if you do not fight, and as importantly, if you accept the logic that you can never vote for somebody because they have some sort of belief structure you disagree with, you are empowering the radicals in your own party, and they will control everything. Whether it's immigration in Germany, which is functionally controlled by people that still believe in chain migration because you could never do a coalition with the right, or whether it's the Democratic Party that is functionally being torn apart by people who believe in anti-progressive, anti-meritocratic values as embodied by not having a border. No progressive ever has believed in an open border. None, never, has never existed, because that undermines the value of workers and their labor. And if you want to see what happens to a culture when you don't fight, look at who's standing up in my former party to say this is ridiculous. Who stood up in Germany to talk about migration? We cannot allow ourselves to become Europe. We really have to fight. And I'm sure many of in here are going to be involved in that. And Palantir, I think, has been at the forefront of this. And I'm most proud of the fact that we've been able to shift the culture to being, in Silicon Valley, away from being skeptical of America to being pro-America. The idea that you would give tools to give Americans an unfair advantage on the battlefield was viewed as heretical until recently. Now it's viewed as common sense. The idea that we
在这场演讲里面，他试图回答一个核心的问题，就是 AI 为什么会在美国爆发，并且它会怎样改变整个文明的结构。卡普先从哲学谈起，他说哲学的核心概念其实都源自于现实世界中被建造了出来的东西，不是先有了思想才有了形态，而是先有了形态，思想才随之而来。现代的建筑影响了现代的哲学，后现代的建筑呢影响了后现代的哲学。没关系，这里没听懂没关系。同样的，今天我们看到的人工智能也会在文化和思想层面带来新的哲学形态。很多我们认为社会上难以理解的现象，其实都不是偶然，它们是技术和文化共同作用的结果。接下来他谈到了一个看似简单但非常深的问题，为什么 AI 的创新几乎都出现在美国？从芯片到大语言模型，从算法架构到风险投资的一个体系，再到人才的一个组织方式，这一整套体系几乎都集中在美国。按理讲大模型的数学起源于欧洲，概率论来自于德国的莱布尼兹， 法国和俄罗斯培养了世界上最强的数学家，理论在欧洲，但 AI 的实际建造、商业化和制度化却在美国完成，这并不是巧合。卡普的解释是，这背后反映出两种文化和制度的底层的差异。他举了一个非常具体的例子，美国宪法和德国宪法的差别。美国的宪法写道，人被造物者赋予若干不可剥夺的权利，也就是说，这些权利是天生的，是高于我们存在的那个更高物种存在创造我们的那个造物主赋予的不可剥夺的权利。这种权利是天生的，不是人类社会，我们这个人类社会给你赋予的，是上帝赋予给我们的。而德国的宪法的写法是人以对上帝的责任为良知，愿为世界和平和欧洲团结而努力。看起来非常相似但是内核完全不同。美国呢，强调权利来自于上帝，不可剥夺；德国强调人对上帝有责任，是社会成员的一部分。一个是建立在上帝赋权的一个信念上，另一个呢是建立在人类共识的这个社会契约上。卡普说，这种区别决定了当 AI 的出现，当机器拥有和人类相当的认知能力的时候，美国文化有一个天然的防线就是因为美国人的权利不取决于你是否有智能、有能力、有共识，也不取决于你这个人、这个社会的理性程度，它来自于一个形而上的信条，就人之所以有尊严，并不因为他聪明，而是因为他生而为人。这意味着当机器能够写作、推理，甚至比人更聪明的时候，欧洲的这个理性主义社会契约可能会陷入到一个哲学的困境，就是你要理性你才能够是人吗？你要是理性，你要能推理，那你这个机器人工智能比人聪明的时候，你这个人何去何从呢？就是说欧洲的这个理性主义可能会陷入到哲学困境，是不是？因为你还得对这个上帝有责任。如果这个 AI 比你还更理性，那不 AI 能够取代你作为人的地位，对上帝也有责任的这个地位了吗？而美国的信念体系就是仍然可以给出答案，就是你不需要很聪明像我们知道那个美国的佛罗里达那些人经常去搞那些鳄鱼，就看起来非常傻，但他就生而为人他就有这个权利这个比喻可能说的不是特别好等会我们还会聊到更深在这个方面。然后呢，卡普聊到了这个劳动价值重组在 AI 的世界里面，那些象征着高端智力的职业，比如说人文学者智库的顾问国际组织的分析员他们的产出都可以被模型去模拟。AI 能够写报告，生成政治政策的语言，能够解释数据，它能做得更好，甚至它能做得更快，甚至还更好。这些职业在客观生产力的意义上，就是正在失去价值。就是这种所谓的高端智力什么智库国际组织的分析人文学者正在失去价值，取而代之的是具有具体技能的人，比如说懂工程的、懂建造的、懂医疗、懂数据安全、懂武器系统的人。这些技能是具体的，不可被替代的。卡普认为这种具体性与美国的宪法精神也是一致的。美国的文化信仰不是建立在抽象的理念上，而是建立在做的基础上。你可以靠自己的能力去建造、去防卫、去创新。就是有一个比喻就是非常好，他说美国人可以用自己的手去保卫自由，你可以有枪，你自己有枪，你自己用这个手去保卫自由，你可以保卫自己的言论和隐私权，去守护你的原则。这套自我防卫的文化正好与 AI 所要求的这个具体技能逻辑是相契合的。你得自己动手你才能开枪嘛，是不是？你得自己动手，你自己捍卫自己的权利，言论的自由，你才能够有这个守护原则的权利嘛。但他也指出这种转变会引发社会的一个震荡。过去那些被视为高端的人群，那些受够精英教育、习惯于抽象思考的阶层，他们的社会地位和经济价值都在下滑。而那些真正做事的人，比如说工人、工程师、医生、军人，他们的工作在 AI 时代反而变得更加核心。卡普说，这会造成一种共情的错位，比如说芬太尼的危机。如果这个受害者是一个常春藤的毕业生，法律系统会立刻想办法解决。但当受害者是普通人、工人、退伍军人，法律反而束手无策。 同样的悲剧，因为阶层的不同，被赋予了不同的社会反应啊。对于这一点，我个人不是特别理解啊，就是因为我没有生活在美国嘛，所以我无法特别的理解。我只是想到了小丑这部电影里面那个镜头啊，就是受害者是几个华尔街的那个西装革履的人啊，然后媒体就大肆的报道，然后其实那几个人是在想要强奸一个女性啊，然后被那个小丑给枪杀了。这是电影情节啊。他认为 Palantir 的使命呢，就是要最大程度的去同情、共情这些真正做事的人，那些社会底层靠行动而非话语去维系国家的人。卡普啊，最后谈到了一个更大的问题，就是权力的组织方式。他说，许多自由派知识分子把同情当作这个道德姿态，但没有组织能力，而真正的力量来自于把理念落实为行动的结构。在他看来，未来的社会竞争，尤其是在 AI 的安全领域啊，胜负不在于谁的理想更动人，而在于谁更能够组织、动员和执行。又聊到了前面说的啊，就是个人动手，要组织、要动员、要执行。美国之所以在 AI 上领先，不仅是因为算力和资金啊，更因为一种根深蒂固的能动文化。人们相信个人可以行动，相信权力是天生的，相信责任是自己的，这让美国能在 AI 时代仍然保持主导的地位。而在比如说中国吧，这一部分恰恰是长期的一个制度性的盲区。在中国，它的组织逻辑啊，更强调是统一行动和目标的服从，个人的能动性呢，往往被这个制度啊吸收掉，变成一种执行力的延伸啊。很多人被训练成理解命令，然后去落实这个任务这样的角色，而不是去质疑、去判断，甚至创造新的解决方式。这种体系啊，在工业时代非常的高效，它可以把一个目标拆解成标准化的流程，快速的复制，快速的完成。但在 AI 时代呢，它会慢慢显示出结构性的滞后，因为在 AI 的世界不再需要完美的执行者，特别是在有了 Palantir 这种公司之后啊，而需要不断的重构这个问题，重构问题的提出者。当机器能够听懂命令，甚至比人类执行的还要更好更快的时候，唯一剩下的价值呢，就是谁能够提出新的问题，谁能定义新的方向，谁能重构整个逻辑。这就恰恰依赖于一种文化上的允许你行动，允许你犯错，允许你尝试，允许你不听这个命令去做。这正是美国制度能激发 AI 创新活力的一个深层的原因。这也是我们在面对新的技术浪潮的时候最需要重新思考的一刻啊！当然，我的这个概括可能也不够具体，这个有非常多可以值得讨论的地方啊！大家可以在视频评论区留下自己的一个真知灼见啊！所以整场演讲的底线呢，其实是一个非常深刻的问题。AI 不仅在重构商业模式，更在重构社会文明的根基。它迫使我们要重新回答一个问题：人类的价值究竟建立在什么之上？在美国，这个答案已经在宪法里面写下来了，不是因为聪明，不是因为共识，而是因为生而为人。这可能正是美国能够承受 AI 的冲击，还能继续定义未来的真正的原因。以上就是对卡普这个深度演讲的解析，希望能够帮助大家理清思路啊。更多内容以及无广告的抢先观看呢，点击视频下方的链接加入频道会员。我们下期再见。